At last, we get to grips with the gorgeous Phantom GTR, and before we climb in and take a drive, you have to take a step back and just soak in that beautiful shape. Anybody that this car has been near does exactly that. First up then, nobody's going to accuse it of being subtle. It isn't. It's a pretty wild looking machine, but take a closer look and you can certainly say that it's restrained. The pen that actually formed this masterful shape did exercise a little restraint. There's no big fins and spoilers sticking out to spoil these absolutely beautiful, elegant lines. And we get to the rear of the car, and under here is where we find nestling the Honda designed V6 2.7 litre engine taken out of the old Rover 800s. So it's a pretty neat installation for all the oily bits at the back, and then we get to the front, and it's here at the kind of user-friendly bit that many a specialist car starts to fall down. Well, it bodes well, because immediately we've got a beautiful setup just for opening the door, and it works beautifully too. Then we climb inside, take a look and see what we get. And immediately we can see that they've taken the very sensible step of keeping things as simple and uncomplicated as possible in here. And that's enabled the designers to achieve a very, very high standard of finish. You could be climbing into pretty much any supercar here. And if we take a look around, the bits and pieces that have been used and those that have been sourced from other cars have been extremely well integrated. There's nothing leaping out at you and shrieking, "I was taken from a very ordinary car." Everything fits very neatly and flushly. We have a very nicely integrated dash here, the dials taken from the Rover, but again, there's nothing really to tell you that. You'll notice as well that this is an automatic version. Now that came as something of a surprise to the manufacturers, but quite a few of the customers asking to have these cars built requested an automatic. But that perhaps has quite a lot to say about the possible future uses for the Phantom, as very much a long-legged supercruiser, which fits in very nicely with its rather suave, elegant and really quite subtle design and image. Norman Morris and the rest of the small Phantom team have spent several years of painstaking development time on the GTR. They've resisted the temptation to capitalise on popular public reaction and rush the car into production prematurely in order to make sure they can take development just as far as possible. And the results? They speak for themselves. We're in the workshop of Norman Morris. The man behind this man has driven it on for nearly 8 years. Norman, 8 years ago, wow, you sat down and got involved in this. How?
Yes, well, a colleague of mine had already started the project, and I got involved with him over just saying that I'll do the doors for you. From that moment on, I've done all of the body work, which is difficult for one person to do anyway. So we've been involved in the chassis, the bodywork, heating, ventilating, wipers, everything you can think of in the car from the chassis upwards. And all the time being very meticulous. You worked prior to this as a professional in the motor industry anyway, and you've brought the same kinds of standards to this, haven't you? Oh yes, absolutely. We've been meticulous in everything we've done, and it shows in the car at the moment. The bugbear of many small manufacturers, which I know is how you think of yourselves here and where you're going with this, is that because there isn't the budget for the development work, a lot of the time you have to practice on your customers. You don't want to do that. We're not going to do that, there's no doubt about that. We are going to have this car as perfect as it's likely to be before the customer gets it. Just for you personally, the car is beautiful, you can't deny it. We were taking it around the golf course earlier on, parking it there, and you have to just pull people off the things. How does it make you feel when people react so positively to it? Well, unbelievable really, never having had a poser's car before. This is it's kind of unbelievable that so many people should gather around it wherever you stop. How important is it to you when you sit back and look at the thing? I mean, are you still interested in looking at it? Do you get bored as the novelty worn off after, what, 8 years of staring at it day in, day out? Never, no. It's truly a magnificent vehicle, and I believe it's one of the most magnificent vehicles ever designed visually. Where's it going to go from here? We are going into production. We're starting production now, and we shall be selling the car as a fully finished vehicle, and if anybody's keen enough, we'll sell them the component parts if they want to build it themselves. Ultimate goal with it? Eventually, we shall crash test the car so that we go into full production as a production vehicle.
As I talk to you, you may pick up a bit of a buzz that's caused by the engine in this that is actually a show car, so we're certainly not yet at the production stage. Nevertheless, first impression is it feels very, very solid. There's none of the kind of slackness that you would expect to feel in a car. It feels absolutely bolted together. The 2.7 litre V6 is a pretty lusty unit out the back, and it may not be the loudest, most raucous noise, but it is quite a pleasant sound behind your head. There's enough thrust provided. Perhaps not the time to thrash this car too heavily. It isn't a production version. Nevertheless, it does feel like there's going to be more than enough performance, and I don't doubt that if you really want to work on it, there are things you can do to add that little more oomph. The ride is really very good. There's none of the bone-shaking, jarring that, again, its external appearance might lead you to suspect. It doesn't feel like a taut race car in terms of jarring ride. It soaks it up quite nicely, which lends it very much towards being used as a long-distance cruiser. I could see this car being ideal for jaunting off across Europe. We've heard the phrase supercar, invented probably in the 70s for the Lamborghinis and Ferraris of the time. Well, we'd like to coin another phrase, the super kit, and it starts here with the Phantom. Because there's no more excuses are needed. This car can stand up alongside some of the most exotic machinery available anywhere from anyone and hold its own very well indeed, thank you. And now we go to possibly the loudest man in TV, John Price.
Hey look, just hold on a minute. Now I know that I'm known for being on television with the noisiest cars and bikes that you can find here on this planet. And I know when I go out as a DJ, I'm always working with big sound systems, making lots and lots of noise, but even I want to change sometimes. So today, here I am. The sun is out, it's beautiful. I'm in this quiet little village just outside of Hitchin in Hertfordshire called Preston. And I'm here to relax and get away from all the row that I'm used to. I'm off to the pub now for a quiet drink. See you later. Well, the man who shattered my silence here in this beautiful little village is this man standing next to me. This is Steve Pateman. He owns what must be one of the loudest street cars in the world, a Vauxhall Calibra. Steve, tell me a little bit about you. How did you get into cars, etc.?
Basically, I'm a mechanic by trade. Obviously, been into cars since I was probably about 15. First car I had was a Mark 1 Escort, and the first car I actually raced at Santapod was a 3 litre Capri, and then the Mark 1 Escort had various engine changes and ended up with the actual Pontiac engine that's in the Calibra now.
Okay, so let's just take a look at this fabulous machine and see what you've done to it. So let's just walk to the back and we'll try and find out exactly what you've done to this car. Now, how much of the car, Steve, is original Calibra?
Basically, just the outer shell is the Vauxhall Calibra. I mean, once the car was originally a front-end write-off, but you cut the front off, floor out. All you're actually using is basically all 4 wings, roof panel, doors, and that's it. And
are these, what we're seeing here, is this original Vauxhall Calibra, or are there replacement lightweight panels on here?
The only lightweight panels on it is the boot lid's fiberglass, the sunroof infill panel and the bonnet. Apart from that, the rest, wings, bumpers, everything's all original Vauxhall.
So your idea then was to keep this as near to standard road trim as you could, but have a car that is worthy of racing on a drag strip?
Yeah, basically what I was trying to achieve was, I mean, I wanted a car that I could use on the road as well as just on the trailer to the track and back again, and not being able to start it because of no exhaust, things like that. So basically I wanted it on the road, but then sort of I wanted to keep it as standard looking from the outside as possible.
Okay, well, turning to the back here, it's got massive wheels on the back. What sort of wheels have you got on it, and what sort of back axle have you got on it?
The back axle's a narrowed 9-inch Ford. Wheels are 15 by 15 centerline Convo Pros with 22.5 33 Mickey Thompson tyres.
So these are street legal tyres you've got on it?
Yeah, they're street tyres. I mean, basically they're the biggest you can get. Going back to the days of when I run my Escort, the back wheels were only 7x14s and the car wouldn't run consistent because it wouldn't grip. So basically this time I wanted to build the car as competitive as possible. So I've just sort of gone for the biggest of everything.
And the 9-inch Ford rear end, that's bulletproof?
Yeah, that was all narrowed by John Webster, who built the chassis. But yeah, it's got the the casing's all back braced. It's got aftermarket internals, shafts, everything.
Okay, well let's just have a look inside this car. Even this looks fairly complicated, the getting in procedure. It's very much Formula One this. The steering wheel comes off and removing all the harnesses so that you don't sit down on something really nasty and sharp, and then it's a quick climb over the roll cage and then the steering wheel goes back on. Who designed all of this? Was it you?
No, up until this I've actually done all my own work, but I wanted to build a car this time that when it actually got to the start line I knew it was going to be as competitive as possible. And back when I originally decided to build another car, basically I was just looking what cars were on the track that were competitive, and there was Brian Pateman's Firebird, Danny Cottrell's Pop, Paula Atkins 100E, all were tube chassis built by John Webster. So basically phoned John Webster down in Southend and it went from there.
Right, so you're actually sitting in a full cage, aren't you? You've got a full cage round you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's purely for safety and racing, etc.
Yeah, I mean basically I took a lot of John's advice on most of it, and Funny Car Cage he said you'd won. At the moment the car's flying quicker this year than I ever thought it would. So yeah, basically it's just for safety. All
right, well look, let's guide us round it, because it doesn't look like my standard Vauxhall Calibra. Tell us a little bit about it. I mean, let's go into the controls in the centre there. What is that?
Basically it's like a ratchet type gear lever, so that you cannot miss a gear or select a wrong gear. I mean basically that is back in first gear now. You leave the start line in first gear, bang it once, that's in top gear, and that is it. You cannot go no further. So
is it just a 2-speed gearbox?
Yeah, it's a 2-speed power glide.
Right, okay. And you've got standard controls here. What about the light on the steering column here?
It's an actual pro light. Most people use rev counters, but just through past experience I couldn't really see the point of a rev counter, because you never really get time to actually look at it. Most of the expensive rev counters have got like small gear change lights in them, so basically that is an adjustable gear change light. You just put whatever rev limit chip you want in it for whatever revs you actually want to change gear.
What you've got here is a safer road car than a normal road car.
Yeah, I mean I'd feel safer having an accident in that. Not that I want one, but I'd feel safer in that than a normal road car.
Talking of accidents, I have noticed a little bit of a scar down here. I presume this is from racing of some kind?
No, that was a incident with a shopping trolley in a car park, believe it or not.
You really do use it then for weekly chores?
Yeah, I mean, if I come home from work and we'd nip out in it, sort of use it when we want.
Well, good luck for this year.
Lovely, right.
Now normally each week I bring you historic kit cars from the past, but this week I've tracked down a man who's contributed a great deal to those historic cars of the past. Terry Sands now runs the Legend Motor Company in the West Midlands, and he's responsible for many of those cars. So, Terry, where did it all begin, mate?
About 30 years ago, Pen. I got involved in the early days through racing, a very deep interest in automotive cars, something out of the ordinary, something different. And from that came my first cars, my first special built cars, mainly for the track initially. Like most of us in the past, I played with the Ashleys and Ginettas and so on of the era, and ultimately that led to a desire to build my own car, or my own series of cars, which I felt would be acceptable to the general public and have the improvements on them that I'd wanted to see in the cars I'd bought.
Where do we go to? Where did you actually start manufacturing?
I started initially with like most people I guess, with the Cobra. Oh. Initially it was about 1974. I brought a little Model T Ford into the country and produced what was then quite unique, a Track T car, which was known as the Mongoose. And shortly after that I had inquiries from people who wanted a Cobra replica. And we found a guy in Birmingham, of all places, that had actually got a shell and wanted to do something with it. But unfortunately at the last minute he got cold feet, and I was left then with a chassis that I designed and a desire to build a car. So I imported a shell from America, and that's really how it all began. The first 2 Cobras went out. They became replicated by quite a number of other manufacturers who all claimed, of course, that they'd taken their cars from a real car. And from then came a series of cars based on historic replicas.
Right. So was this Sheldonhurst? Was this where Sheldonhurst started?
This was a little before Sheldonhurst.
Pre-Sheldonhurst.
Yeah, this was pre-Sheldonhurst days. The company originally was Sandwood Automotive.
Right.
And basically at that stage we were involved with V8s, V12s, 6-cylinder engines, but at that time came the beginnings of the 356, and that was in 1982.
Okay, so take me through Sheldonhurst, because they had a huge range of cars at one time.
Yeah, I was always accused of producing too many cars, but my theory was life is short, and get all your toys together, you know, before you pop your clogs. And there were lots of cars that I loved and could never ever afford, which I think is the whole root of the replica industry. You can provide something for people who've always desired something, can't afford it, or if they can afford it, maybe they can't buy one because there just isn't one. All the things that make a replica really important to that person. So I developed a range of cars, the XK120, the Cobra, of course. I was involved with D-types, and we did the Mongoose. We put the Mongoose into production as a car, which did very, very well, and crossed the barriers between the hot rodders and the kit car enthusiasts and the replica people.
The Legend Motor Company, I mean, I know 2 Legends. There's the Legend series, which is the little things. Yourself, obviously, a Legend. But the Legend Motor Company seems to produce solely VW-based cars, which, let's face it, is your roots almost.
Yeah, I've been accused, patted on the back over the years by journalists such as yourself for not liking Volkswagens. Now I have to say that the Volkswagen is an anachronism to me, because it's so old-fashioned. It doesn't really do things very, very well. 50 years ago it was a very good car. 25 years ago it was a pretty good car. Now I feel that we're recreating everybody. There's a current thing now with Brussels that all cars have got to be recyclable. We've been doing that for years. Absolutely. In this industry. They're just way behind.
Well, it's that time again. Work continues apace on our project car, so let's update and see where we've got to. Day 3. We had a late one last night at the end of day 2, you might tell from the state of me, and also from the state of our car, which is actually starting to look a little bit like a car. Now, everybody here was frantically telling me, don't worry, Rich, as soon as you get anything like the wheels and bits of suspension on, you'll cheer up and it'll start to look a bit more hopeful. And it does look a lot better, and I do feel a lot more hopeful about it. We had a bit of help from our friend Steve doing this, and it's a good idea because we were getting into a bit of difficulty. It's all fairly straightforward to get these lovely little inboard shocks. It's quite a nice setup, and quite a lovely little device for getting rid of the original strut and this little cut down operation here, which means we can bring it all into this form with this wishbone here. The important things to remember are, put this on the right way up, I put it on upside down, which would give you some rather odd steering geometry. And also, a complaint, I suppose, in that the bushes that go into here, there are metal sleeved rubber bushes that go inside this, are an incredibly tight fit. And the little diagram optimistically has somebody with a hammer tapping them in gently on a bench. I don't think so. Fortunately, we had access to an 80-ton press, which does lend a little much-needed persuasion to make the job a little bit easier. So the front is pretty much set up. We are still missing the steering rubbers to go in, the brackets that hold the steering rack and niggly bits like that will get tied down and sorted out today as work progresses. Late last night, the last thing we did was our other friend Darren came in and gave us a bit of a hand getting the loom sorted out. I mean, it's a custom-made loom for the car, so there's no messing around with an horrible, oily, greasy mess dragged out of something on a scrap heap, which is wonderful. But neither are the particularly comprehensive instructions. Having said that, it took him about half an hour to sort out what would have taken me about 4 hours. So that's all in place. We're going to knock that into the transmission tunnel. We've done it in a slightly different order here because we wanted to get the oily bits on first. Hopefully we're going to find that that doesn't give us a problem. Let's get my overalls out of the way. Rear suspension is in place. This is a doddle. This really is not a difficult job at all. Simply these two bolts here on either side of the chassis, basically lifted up and off of the diff at the back with its bracket onto the mounting plate. Although the mounting plate didn't seem to be in quite the right place. And Jim, on the video that they sort of let you have a quick glance at to give you an idea of how it goes together, says you need to cut away a bit of the suspension in here. Well, we didn't. I don't know whether that means something's in the wrong place. I suspect it just means we've got a slightly different version of the rear axle assembly, but I don't think that's important. Rear springs more or less in place loosely. We've got to drop this and get those fixed in. The shocks are here. Bit of a temporary measure here because you do need washers to pad out the tops here where they're a bit loose in the bracket. But again, it's all more or less in place for us, so we can start threading the brake pipes around it. As I say, we're going to do those afterwards. The book kind of suggests you do it first, but now we've got everything in place, hopefully we'll know precisely where the pipes need to be located to do that. We hope. And that's progress so far. Day 3 begins, and we're expecting to see some big visible results today. We're getting towards getting it rolling, probably the next couple of hours. Finish off the steering setup. We're getting there. We're feeling good. Stressful, isn't it? Where's my overalls? Let me explain something to you. Let's just step outside for a second. Things have got a little tense in here. You may remember that earlier on we were working on the rear suspension and we wondered why. Jim had told us to cut away part of it and we couldn't see what needed to be cut away. It all seemed to fit perfectly. Then, being impatient as we are, we put all 4 wheels on the car, lowered it down to the ground, sat in it and thought, this is great, but it's very low at the back. Then we found out why. Because the Sierra suspension unit, where it fits, the 2 front mounting points have to be fitted on what we now realise is an obvious little place for it on top of the rear of the chassis, on the stressed points for it. That's why we needed to cut it away. That's why it was too low, because we'd fitted it at the bottom. And that means that now, well, we've got to put it back up on jacks, we've got to take all 4 wheels off, and we've got to put right our mistake. A lesson learnt, I think, in paying attention. But I would say this, it wasn't necessarily that obvious at the time. Here it is, the cause of our problems. This needs to be here. We put it here. Back to the drawing board for a bit.
Fitting the engine proved far easier than any of us ever expected. With the help of a block and tackle, a sealing joist and Steve's supervision, the complete engine and gearbox assembly was eased into place. The alternator fan does come close to the suspension rocker arm, but it tucks away neatly with plenty of clearance. Next, we drill out the holes to accept the engine mount, and we're there.